The rain fell softly over Accra that morning, washing the streets clean as church bells echoed from a distance. Inside the grand Owusu family mansion, everything sparkled. Polished floors, golden curtains, laughter of guests, the scent of imported roses. But inside Emma Mensah's chest, there was only trembling silence. She stood before the mirror in her wedding gown, her hands shaking. The white lace was elegant but simple, a stark contrast to the designer fabrics that surrounded her. Her mother had sewn it herself, stitching love into every thread because money couldn't buy another. Outside, the guests whispered, "That's the girl from Kumasi? She doesn't look like a society bride." Emma heard them, though she pretended not to. She'd come this far by believing in Kwame's promises, that love would conquer everything. He had told her she was his peace, that he didn't care where she came from. But as she stepped out to walk down the aisle, she caught the sharp eyes of Madame Cecilia Owusu, Kwame's mother, eyes that burned with quiet disapproval. After the vows, during the reception, Cecilia leaned in close and said softly, "Enjoy this moment. Emma, it won't last. My son deserves a woman of class, not charity." Emma's smile faltered, but she held her ground. "I may not have wealth, Ma, but I have love." "Love fades," Cecilia replied. "Status stays." That night, when the lights went out and the mansion grew quiet, Emma lay beside her husband, her eyes open in the dark. Kwame's breathing was steady, peaceful, but her heart wasn't. For the first time since meeting him, she felt small, like an outsider in her own marriage. Days turned into weeks, and every moment was a silent battle. Cecilia criticized her cooking, her clothes, even her accent. Kwame began to change, missing dinners, answering calls in secret, coming home late. One evening, when Emma served him food, he barely touched it. "Emma, my mother says you're struggling to fit in. Maybe she's right. This isn't Kumasi." Emma blinked back tears. "So you regret marrying me?" Kwame didn't answer. He simply stood, took his car keys, and left. The echo of the closing door was louder than thunder. That night, Emma cried until dawn. But in her heart, she made a promise. If this family wanted to see her broken, they would have to try harder. 2 months later, everything she feared became reality. Social media buzzed with headlines. Owusu heir to a banker's daughter, Sirwa Addo. Emma stared at her phone, her fingers trembling. Her marriage wasn't even 2 years old. The article claimed that her union with Kwame wasn't officially recognized by the family. It was a lie, but no one questioned the Owusus. When she went to confront Kwame, she found him packing his clothes. "It's over, Emma," he said coldly. "You don't belong in my world. After everything, after I left my home for you. My mother was right. You're not enough." Her knees weakened. She tried to speak, but no words came. 2 weeks later, she watched on TV as Kwame and Sirwa exchanged vows in a lavish ceremony at Labadee Beach Hotel. Sirwa was beautiful, radiant, dripping in diamonds, the image of perfection. Emma sat in her mother's living room in Kumasi, silent, holding her mother's hand. "My daughter," her mother said softly, "sometimes God lets people throw you away so he can make space for something better." Emma's tears finally came, but they weren't just of heartbreak, they were of awakening. She began working at a friend's store in Kajisha Market, selling ankara and lace. Each morning, she woke before dawn, carrying bolts of fabric, shouting prices with confidence. She smiled for customers, even when pain burned inside. And slowly, something began to change. Her designs became popular. She mixed colors no one dared to combine, royal blue and gold, emerald and brown. Women started coming from far places to buy Emma's magic touch. Within months, she saved enough to rent her own shop. She named it Emma Lux Designs, not out of pride, but out of purpose. And when the first signboard went up, she whispered to herself, "You can take everything from me, except my will to rise." Emma worked tirelessly. The market heat didn't scare her. The long hours didn't drain her. Every roll of fabric was a step away from humiliation. Her kindness drew people. She gave discounts to struggling mothers, stitched free school uniforms for children. Customers trusted her. Soon, she was invited to showcase her work at a small fashion event in Accra. Nervous but determined, she presented her designs, bold, vibrant, Ghanaian. The crowd loved her. That night, a fashion blogger posted, "Meet Emma Mensah, the woman sewing grace out of pain." Her page went viral. Orders poured in. By the end of the year, she opened her boutique in East Legon. Emma Lux's designs became a household name. Meanwhile, the Owusu household began to crack. Kwame's new wife, Serwa, was everything the family had wanted, elegant but cold. She belittled the staff, insulted Kwame in front of guests, and cared more for photo shoots than partnership. When Kwame's business hit a snag, Serwa refused to support him. "Don't bring your failures to me," she snapped. For the first time, he remembered Emma's patience, her warmth, her laughter. Guilt settled in his chest-like lead. Emma's big break came at the Women in Business Awards. She arrived in a gold gown she designed herself. Cameras flashed, the crowd gasped. When her name was called for Young Entrepreneur of the Year, she walked up the stage with grace. Madam Cecilia was in the audience. Her mouth fell open. Emma smiled, took the MIC, and said, "To every woman told she's not enough, prove them wrong by becoming more." The hall erupted in applause. In the Owusu mansion, peace had vanished. Serwa shouted more than she smiled. Kwame drank to forget. Their marriage, built on pride, was collapsing. One night, during a party, Serwa humiliated Kwame in front of guests. "Look at you. Your ex-wife is on TV while you're losing everything." He snapped and left the house. Driving aimlessly, he ended up parked outside Emma Lux's boutique. He watched the glowing sign, the smiling customers, the posters with her face. She had become everything he once dreamed of, without him. Days later, he gathered the courage to visit. When he entered, Emma looked up, surprised. "Kwame." "Emma," he whispered, "I came to say, I'm sorry. Sorry won't rebuild what you destroyed." He nodded. "I know, but I needed to say it." "Then you said it. Now go find who you are outside your mother's shadow." She turned and walked back to her desk, leaving him standing there like a ghost of his own past. Weeks later, a recording leaked online. Sir was shouting at Kwame, "You'll crawl back to that market woman again." The internet went wild. Memes, gossip blogs, talk shows, everyone discussed the Owusu scandal. And in every conversation, one name kept returning, Emma Mensah. But Emma stayed quiet. She was no longer the crying bride. She was a woman everyone now admired. Invited to speak at TEDx Accra, Emma stood before a red backdrop, confident, calm. "I was once told I wasn't good enough," she began. "But rejection was just redirection. If they hadn't pushed me away, I'd never have found myself." The hall erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. The video hit 1 million views in 3 days. Across town, Kwame watched it alone, eyes wet. Even Madam Cecilia, sitting before her TV, whispered, "God, what have I done?" Emma's laughter at the event was soft, humble, but powerful. The same laughter the Owusu family once mocked now filled Ghana with inspiration. And that was the beginning of her last laugh. The roar of applause echoed through the grand hall in Paris. Cameras flashed from every corner, catching Emma as she walked down the runway at Paris Fashion Week. The moment she stepped out in her final creation, a breathtaking fusion of Kent and silk, the crowd rose to its feet. Emma bowed gracefully, her heart pounding not with fear, but fulfillment. 3 years ago, she had been a humiliated wife in Kumasi. Now, she stood on an international stage, celebrated for her creativity. Backstage, journalists crowded around her. "Madam Emma, what inspired your designs?" She smiled softly. Pain, faith, and Ghanaian pride. That line went viral the next morning. Pain, faith, and Ghanaian pride. It became the headline across Africa. Back home in Accra, televisions blared with her interview. People who once mocked her now proudly claimed, "She's from Ghana. She's one of us." Kwame watched from his apartment. He had lost nearly everything: his company, his reputation, his peace. The man who once looked down on her now admired her from afar. He whispered to himself, "You were always a gem, Emma. I was a fool." Emma returned home to a hero's welcome. At Kotoka Airport, cameras surrounded her. Little girls waved hand-drawn signs. "We love you, Emmalux." In that moment, she knew she hadn't just survived. She had inspired a nation. Success comes with shadows. One afternoon, Emma's PR manager burst into her office, panic in her voice. "Madam, someone leaked documents online. They're saying your company was funded by Owusu Holdings." Emma froze. That was impossible. She had built Emmalux from her own sweat. But social media didn't care about truth. Accusations spread like wildfire. Headlines read, "Owusu ex-family secretly behind Emmalux." Her staff panicked. Clients began to ask questions. Emma called an emergency press conference. Dressed in an all-white pantsuit, she stood before flashing cameras and said, "I started Emmalux with 2,000 sadies and a dream. Not one pesewa came from anyone named Owusu. You can check every record." Then she did something bold. She released a full financial audit to the public. Transparency killed the rumors. The next day, the media flipped the story. Emma Mensah silences critics with grace and proof. Kwame saw it all. Disgusted, he confronted his mother's former business associates. It turned out one bitter ex-employee of Owusu Holdings had fabricated the leak to help Serwa's image. Kwame personally called Emma. "Emma, I swear I didn't know. I'll fix it." Emma sighed. "You don't owe me anything, Kwame, but maybe this is your chance to start fixing yourself." Her calm voice pierced him deeper than anger ever could. Kwame disappeared from public life. He left Accra and moved to Cape Coast, where he began teaching young people about ethical business practices. His students admired him, not as a tycoon, but as a humbled man. Emma, on the other hand, expanded Emmalux into neighboring countries. Her rebirth initiative trained hundreds of women in tailoring, branding, and entrepreneurship. During one training event in Takoradi, she met Kojo Nati, a widowed architect volunteering to design community centers for free. Kojo was gentle, thoughtful, and admired her strength without envy. He often said, "Emma, your presence heals the broken parts in others." Their friendship deepened. He made her laugh again, a soft, genuine laugh she hadn't known in years. Tabloids noticed, of course. Emmalux found his new love. The headline screamed. But Emma ignored the gossip. She valued peace over publicity. Then one day, Kwame called again. This time, his tone shaky. "Emma, my mother. She's sick. Hypertension. She wants to see you." Emma hesitated, but compassion won. When she entered the hospital room, Madame Cecilia's face lit up weakly. "Emma, I don't deserve to see you." Emma took her hand gently. "You don't need to deserve forgiveness, Ma. You only need to ask." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "You were always the right one for my son." Emma smiled sadly. "Maybe I was the right one to teach him a lesson life couldn't." That night, Madame Cecilia passed peacefully, and for the first time, Emma wept not out of pain, but release. A week after the funeral, a lawyer visited Emma's office with an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a land deed. The letter read, "Emma, I destroyed my son's joy and your peace. This land is my apology. Build something that heals where I once caused pain. Cecilia Owusu." Emma stared at it for a long time. Then she smiled softly. Months later, bulldozers arrived at the plot in Kumasi. She used the land to build the Cecilia Owusu Center for Women in Enterprise, a training hub for widows, single mothers, and survivors of abuse. At the grand opening, Emma unveiled a plaque herself. Kwame was there, standing quietly in the crowd. "Today, we honor a woman who taught me what pride can destroy," Emma said, "and what humility can rebuild." The crowd applauded. Even Kwame couldn't hold back his tears. After the ceremony, he approached her quietly. "You turned her guilt into grace. You're remarkable." Emma smiled faintly. "Pain refines you, Kwame. It either makes you bitter or better. I chose better." Emma's brand reached new heights. She signed a partnership with an international design firm and was preparing to launch Emmalux London. But just as success peaked, a hacker attacked a company's website. Designs, client lists, stolen. Hours later, an anonymous message came through. 500000 or your brand collapses. Emma froze. Her IT team traced the account, and the truth shocked her. The hacker was Sir's brother, desperate for money after his family's bankruptcy. Her lawyer urged her to prosecute. Emma shook her head. No, let karma do its work. I won't turn vengeance into my new business. Instead, she released a statement. We won't let darkness dim our light. Emma Luck stands for grace, not greed. The internet erupted in admiration. The story trended for days. #Emma Mensa Grace. That same week, Kojo proposed under the stars in the Bury Gardens. You've carried pain alone long enough. Let me be your peace. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She said yes. Kwame heard about it weeks later. He smiled genuinely for the first time in years. At the wedding, he stood among the guests quietly as Emma, radiant in gold and white, walked down the aisle. The sun over Adafo shimmered gold across the water. Guests arrived barefoot on the sand, laughing softly as waves rolled against the shore. Emma stood at the end of the aisle in a gown woven from cream and gold Kent, the Atlantic breeze lifting her veil. Across from her waited Kojo Nati, the man who had shown her that peace could feel louder than applause. When the pastor spoke the final words, "You may kiss your bride," cheers broke out. Emma smiled through tears. This time there was no gossip, no performance, only hearts that meant what they said. Their home in East Legon was nothing like the Owusu mansion. White walls, open windows, laughter echoing through every room. In the evenings Kojo cooked, Emma danced barefoot to old Kojo Antwi songs. Together they founded the Rebuild Foundation, using profits from Emma Lux to renovate rural schools and sponsor girls into university. Every ribbon they cut, every smiling student they helped, felt like healing for the girl Emma once was. Meanwhile, in Accra, Kwame spent his days volunteering at a youth business center. He taught young men how greed destroys vision. His once polished suits were replaced with simple shirts, humility written across his face. When people asked about his past, he said only, "I lost a queen because I couldn't recognize one." A year later, Emma's invitation to Paris Fashion Week arrived again, this time not as a participant, but as the headline designer. She and Kojo landed in France to flashing cameras. Reporters shouted her name. French models bowed slightly when she passed. Her new line, Grace and Bloom, fused Ghanaian motifs with European cuts, storytelling stitched into fabric. The runway erupted with applause. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. One journalist wrote, "Emma Mensa reminds the world that elegance can be born from endurance." Later that night, on the balcony of a hotel overlooking the Seine, Kojo held her close. "You turned ashes into architecture," he whispered. Emma laughed softly. "No, God turned rejection into redirection." Her words spread online as quotes. #Grace and Bloom trended across Africa. Even Kwame shared it quietly on his page with a single caption, "Respect." Soon after Paris, a young documentary filmmaker requested to tell Emma's story. She hesitated. Reopening wounds was risky, but Kojo said gently, "Your truth can free someone else." She agreed. The film, titled The First Wife, premiered on Netflix Africa. It began with her wedding humiliation and ended with her Paris triumph. Viewers across the continent wept. Tweets poured in, "I'm Emma, and I will rise." But the release unsettled one person, Serwa Addo, Kwame's ex-second wife. Her family had vanished into quiet anonymity after their scandals, and seeing her name on screen reopened her shame. She reached out to Emma through an email filled with regret. Emma surprised her by replying, "Come to my office." When Serwa arrived, thin and humbled, Emma poured her tea. "I didn't make that film to shame you," Emma said. "I made it to remind women that pain doesn't end purpose." Serwa's voice cracked. "I destroyed your marriage." "No," Emma smiled. "You helped build my destiny." They embraced. 2 former rivals turned testimonies of grace. Years passed. Emma and Kojo's foundation grew beyond Ghana. Branches opened in Togo, Nigeria, and Kenya. But Emma dreamed bigger, something permanent. On the same land in Kumasi where she once cried after her first divorce, bulldozers rolled again. This time, for the legacy village, a 10-acre estate with classrooms, tailoring workshops, a clinic, and dormitories for widows and abandoned mothers. At the grand opening, hundreds gathered. The president's wife cut the ribbon. Emma spoke, her voice steady over the hum of cameras. The woman they said was unfit built a place fit for every woman. Applause thundered. Kwame stood quietly at the back. When the crowd thinned, he approached her. "You did it, Emma." "We all did, Kwame. Even those who broke me taught me how to rebuild." Their handshake, respectful, genuine, went viral. The caption on social media read, "Forgiveness looks good on success." 10 years later, Emma sat on a veranda in East Legon, watching the sunset paint the sky crimson over the city she once feared. Children from the foundation ran across the compound, their laughter echoing through the trees. Kojo brought her a cup of hibiscus tea. "They cold," he said with a grin. "You've been listed among Africa's 50 most influential women of the decade." Emma smiled. Imagine that, the same woman they once called not good enough. She opened her journal, the pages filled with notes from years of lessons, and wrote, "Grace is strength wrapped in softness. The loudest victory is peace." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the city lights blinked awake. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, the same sound she'd heard on her first wedding day, now carrying a new meaning. Emma looked toward the ocean and laughed, gentle, content, unforced. That laughter rolled through the evening breeze, carried across Accra's rooftops and down to the streets where girls whispered her name like a promise. Because the woman they discarded had become the woman every daughter now admired. She hadn't just laughed last. She'd laughed forever.